Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Breathe Pulse. It's your boy, Davis Daly. We've got a really exciting pulse coming up this afternoon, so thank you so much for joining us. We have Gabriel Halpren speaking to us tonight. He's offering a nice Dharma talk that I'm personally really excited for. The guy's been practicing yoga for over 50 years. He holds college degrees in, philosophy and health psychology. He is the founder and former director of the Yoga Circle, and just an all-around great guy. At age 72, he has found himself in the Breathe virtual studio. Coming at us live tonight from Chicago, we have Gabriel.
That's great. Thanks for that intro.
Hey, thanks. I do my best. Thank you for spending the time tonight.
Great. I'm thrilled to be here with everybody, even though I can't see you. So if I'm playing to myself, enjoy the show. I'll try to be as entertaining as I possibly can. So I have so much to say. We all have an hour to do this in. The reason why you haven't seen me on TED Talks is because I can't keep it down to 17 minutes. But so if this seems like it's rapid fire, just remember I am from Brooklyn, New York, and we talk fast from the East Coast. But I'll try to get as much as we can in and leave time for Q&A at the end of this. So I'm going to give a little intro to this and then a PowerPoint presentation. And then some time for questions and answers as we wrap it up. First of all, I love the fact that your tagline is discover your purpose and awaken our world. And I'll show you how that rolls over into yoga, because I want to get this clear as my first disclaimer. I'm not here tonight as a political commentator. I'm not here tonight as a social activist. I'm not here tonight as a career counselor. I'm here putting on the mask of the yoga teacher, the persona. I'm consciously letting you know I'm slipping in behind that role, which I've been very fortunate to be able to play that role and indulge myself in my own passion for 50 years. But to take it off for a second, I just want to let you know I'm in the trenches of life like everybody else. And we have lost relatives to COVID, and the worst scenario that you would hate to have to go through, like taking a relative to the hospital, leaving them there, not seeing them for the next 5 weeks, and they die while they're in the hospital. So no degrees of separation for me. So when I share what I share, it's not that I haven't experienced loss. I'm going to talk about that as part of the path. But I'm purposely modeling the steady rudder and the positive outlook. And so don't think because I'm vocalizing that in a minute that I've lost contact with, or somehow I'm not realistic about facing the other things in life. So now we got that out of the way, back to what we're doing. Did you wake up this morning and the first thing for guys, did you look in the mirror and just say to yourself, you are too sexy? Antonio Banderas, eat your heart out. And ladies, did you wake up this morning like Oprah and look in the mirror and go, I love bread? Okay, just wanted to find that out. Anyway, look behind me, right in my own room. I don't even have to decorate and put a cosmic background. If you know how to look at things metaphorically, symbolically, poetically, archetypally, mystically, metaphorically, all of life opens up. Like Goethe said, everything transitory is a metaphor. So right behind me, I just have a couple of things I want to remind you. It's kind of like the background of everything I'm saying, as well as the fact, of course, I got my Shiva shirt on, the Lord of Yogis. He's also the Lord of Destruction, right? You call him in, not like an anarchist kind of destruction. You call him in when you want things to be jettisoned out of your life. Certain things deserve to be flushed away, and not only just your own toxic waste, but that's keeping you from experiencing spirit, right? He's the destructive things that kill the stuff, get rid of the stuff that prevents you from worshiping and adoring spirit in whatever form you perceive it. He's also the Lord of the dance. So he's the one who teaches you to kind of swing with the whole thing, right? And he's also the Lord of Yogis. And don't forget Om Shiva Shankara Hari Hari Ganja, right? He's also, remember, a chillum smoking Baba. So he also has ways of doing that, and really potent deity. Nonetheless, first there's a light switch on in the background. And that's to ask you, when you woke up this morning, did you realize your soul was returned to you for another day, and you flipped the switch on and said, yeah, great, thank you so much. One more day to do as much good as I can to as many as I can for as long as I can. Or you didn't realize you had an option to turn the switch on. You went into life with the switch off. Now, I know we're in America now, we're like, nobody should mandate to you that you have to have the switch on. No, please, I'm from Brooklyn. No one's going to tell me what I have to do. I get it. I just invite you, in case you didn't remember to put the switch on, because of all the traditions I pick from, one of them, the Jewish tradition, says that the first thought once you realize you're awake is Modeh Ani, grateful I am. Not I am grateful, I come second. It's the gratefulness that overshadows you, and you feel so humbled by all the things you recognize have been given to you. So thank you very much for one more opportunity. So I invite you to have the switch on. I prefer you to be here with the switch on. You'd probably enjoy it more if your switch was on. I'd probably be able to enjoy you more if your switch was on, but it's just an invitation. Keep the switch on and remember that as a little life teaching. Next thing is, if I shift like this, you'll realize that, oh, there are two mirrors in there. There's a small mirror, and there's a bigger mirror. And the small mirror, I guess, is when you want to see things really up close, like when you're looking at your own personality, your own ego, and not just the surface aspect of you, how you act in relationship to other people, and how your scorecard is. But also, if you go a little deeper, right, there are things about your own personality you don't share with all and sundry, like by invitation only, maybe even things you don't even know about yourself, or things you stuffed away because of past trauma. But that's the little mirror. And a lot of times when they say know yourself, a lot of people think, well, that's what they're talking about. Get to know a better sense of who I am and the depth stuff and my history and all the vignette experiences and my timeline that's brought me to here. I get that. But that's not what yoga is talking about, even though you become more aware. And if you want to follow your next tagline, which is awaken our world and stay woke, as you young people say, yoga is not talking about that mirror. And they're not saying that there isn't knowledge that you should know about yourself and the world, but they're saying, well, there's another mirror as well, a bigger mirror, a wider perspective, a mirror that sheds light on what is the source of consciousness itself. They posit the idea that mind can exist without content. This makes no sense to our Western way of understanding. There always has to be someone aware of something, like a separation between object and subject. But when you have this merger they call yoga, they have so many different words for it, nuanced words that we don't share in our own language because we haven't explored consciousness as introspectively as they have. We've explored consciousness in terms of neurochemistry, neurobiology, what happens in the meditator's head when brainwaves kick off when they're in deep like that. But that still doesn't understand what is consciousness. And they're saying that it's kind of empty of attributes, but it's filled with light in a certain way that enables one to see whatever it is. But the seeing or the seer is not the content of what they see. And one of the examples I give is, if you walk into a room that's dark, nothing can be made out as clear and distinct, but you flip the light switch on, oh, now I see the differentiation. Great. There's the lamp, and there's the rug, and there's the telephone, and there's the picture hanging on the wall. But the light, which illuminates and differentiates all of those things, is none of those things that it illuminates. So yoga is asking you eventually to trace back to the big mirror. So you're not just lost in the little mirror. And we're not saying there isn't tremendous value to the little mirror and learning what you need to know about yourself here while you're incarnate, but it's reflective of something else, which is the ability to be cognizant of anything, awareness. And awareness hurts, but the reason why I'm giving this pitch is we're all subject to more suffering in the sleepy state. So a lot of this is about, how do I awaken? And we're going to talk about the positive aspect of that and then the flip side, because every yin has a yang. And then behind me is, the tanka of the Tibetan masters. And it could be any tradition. It's just those beings that represent the excellence of what human beings are capable of. And that part of human beings that looks towards honoring what was been bequeathed to us from the past generation, doing its best to help out and make it as good for everybody right now in this generation, and planting whatever seeds are possible for the people to take over, like you. You are the leaders already of today, not just of the future, but also how in perpetuity to feel, is there some kind of astral connection between those who have gone beyond or passed on or no longer incarnated or living in a different dimension, or whatever way you want to keep alive and enshrine in your heart people whose dedication is for all human beings to not have suffering, to include everybody till they make it to final enlightenment. At least that's the story they say. And, you know, if you know a better story or a different one, let me know. But that's what they say, and I believe them. So they're in the background. The masters, the ascended masters, always looking out over the human beings, the fields of the Buddha fields, as they say, who's reaching for the light? Because they can't enforce it upon you. Supposedly we have free will, even though computer algorithms may prove we really don't at one day. But right now, anybody who's reaching for the light, they send them some. Because if you want to invoke a response, you have to evoke their presence. You have to ask them to come in. And as Jung said, the gods retreat from a disrespectful and inhospitable world. So don't forget to make cross planes of alliance. The people don't even have to be alive. They don't even have to have really ever lived. They can be fictional, because a lot of this is going to be a romance with your imagination as you tell a better story to help you move forward in the future. All right, so that's my background. Now, before I get into the PowerPoint presentation, I want to share something about mentoring. And when I grew up, when I came of age, I didn't have a lot of older people who were role models for me. There was a tremendous heady feeling in the United States post World War II in the early 60s, before my era, the hippie era, came of age. There was such change, there was such promise. We were on top of the world. Kennedy represented such a youthful vision of moving ahead, and civil rights was on the way, was working, and the anti-atomic era was going, and it was just about to burst into all these things. But then he got assassinated. The Watergate thing happened. Vietnam happened. So many things changed. And the biggest surprise was the proletariat. Marx was wrong. The revolution didn't come from the proletariat. It came from the children of the bourgeoisie. And so they educated us to a certain extent that they never had. The World War II generation, the Depression generation, they did not have the opportunities that we did. So we were the first generation that really got educated way beyond what our parents and grandparents, God bless them, which is what they wanted for us. But they didn't realize what the education was going to do for us, which was critique the rotten aspects of the shadow part of the United States and the imperialism that we did, the colonialism we did. After being a colony and breaking away, we became as despotic in certain ways as other people. Unbelievable. And yet the dream of America was what still was in the hearts of everybody, even though it didn't get realized yet and still hasn't been realized. But the dream is what everybody thinks they would like to see as the omega point. So while we're doing this, I just want to say this. I didn't have elders to look to, and not only just in terms of general role models, but even in yoga. There were no senior yoga teachers. There were only roshis and swamis, and priests coming over from other countries and not giving us liturgy, giving us technique. We were hungry for technique. We didn't want words and concepts. We wanted an experience of the thing. It was fantastic, but we were so gullible. We were so naive. We didn't know how to tell anybody who was bona fide from who were charlatans. And there's charlatans in every field, bad apples in every crate. And as the Sufis say, the only reason why there's counterfeit is because there's gold. So you have to have a belief that this thing would not have lasted for so long. And remember, it comes from a non-white culture. So I love that aspect of it. It's human insight, not a Caucasian. It's human insight. And I love the idea that they give you technique that you can experience it yourself. Because every winner is once a beginner. And I'd rather watch a winner any day than just listen to what a winner has to say. Because if I see how they do it, or if they can teach me how to do it, that's better than just listening to the words and concepts. So I grew up hungry for the ritual elder. I read all these stories about the initiations that public school took over and didn't really do a great job, although I got my education in the public school system of New York City, and we really learned liberal arts and the humanities. I'm so thrilled that was my education, because now it's appalling what's happened to the educational base that we give people, because it's not really based on education, it's based on instruction. And instruction means packing in information with no regard to whether or not it fits for this individual. And also is keyed into how well you're going to do on scores and tests and competition to get into a better school, and a kind of win-lose situation that's rife, that doesn't really help. But education is really about drawing forth from within the individual what they feel is leading them forward in life, helping other people discover their passion. Isn't that your tagline, right? Discover your purpose. That's called your Dharma, your Svadharma in yoga, the path of optimal unfolding for you. And of course, you have to work through your karma, which is the cause and effect situation of how your life ended up based on choices you made, consciously or unconsciously. And I like to get this out right away. I can't see you, but most people usually acknowledge this when I say it. Are you willing to admit that you made choices in your life where, as a result of those choices, things didn't go well for you? Most would say, oh yeah, I really messed up with that one. Got it. I hope you learned a lesson, right? But then at the other side, like, are also willing to admit to yourself and in public that you've also made other choices where, as a result of those choices, things did go. Oh yeah, you know that too, right? Well, now you understand karma. You understand what cause and effect is. I chose this, or I did this, and that happened as a result. And once you understand that everybody is the inheritor, the heir, H-E-I-R, the heir of their own wholesome and unwholesome deeds, you want to start aligning yourself with the wholesome deeds and try to get a good karma snowball running in your own direction. So yoga, for me, was the path that led me to a tradition where I could get initiated. And of course, you learn as much as you can, as quick as you can, and then you got to do a lot of stuff on your own. It's a path of personal responsibility. It's great if you can have a relationship with a teacher to bounce things off of, and someone you trust to tell you the truth and give you critique, not to tear you down, but to improve your performance, because usually they're a master of a specific craft, whether it's the yoga poses or sitting meditation or throwing a pot or calligraphy or gardening or tea ceremony, or it doesn't matter, but they can demonstrate something in a form and teach you the nuances of that form and take you so far through, you can end up being a teacher for other people. But through the form, you learn about how to surrender to spirit, how to redevelop an aesthetic. So your whole approach to life has beauty connected to it. And then, of course, how do you then use your gifts to contribute to society? And to a certain extent, how does your whole life become service to other people? And you quickly get over the whole idea of, like, I don't want to play with power. Because in the old school, people said, like Lord Chesterfield, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So you see people who don't have maturity and don't have their heads screwed on straight or their heart open. And when they get to have power, they lord it over other people. And we see the worst excesses. But if you just remember that when you get to the third chakra and you start playing with your personal power, because remember, as Don Juan said to Carlos Castaneda, even if I gave you the key to the secret of the universe and you had no personal power, it wouldn't do you any good. So we all have to develop something, right? Even if you want to have what they call egolessness. Ego death comes from ego strength, not from ego weakness. So you got to develop something in order to give it up. But when you get to that level of personal power, as long as you understand how to use power on behalf of other people instead of power over other people, then you'll know where your intentions are coming from. Because the same act done from a different intention can have such different ramifications. Like the knife in a surgeon cuts to heal, the knife in a thief cuts to hurt. The action is the same, but where they're both coming from determines the difference between whether it hurts or whether it heals. So you learn a technique and then you naturally want to pass it on. And not just because one of my masters said, if you want to know something, read it. You want to learn something, write it. And if you want to master something, teach it. Even though you think like you've mastered it first and then you teach it. But, some things you kind of learn along the way, even though you have some degree of mastery. But it's an open-ended field. Although I believe we should have a high bar of aspiration to ourselves, the word perfection is a really interesting term because from a Gestalt psychology point of view, perfection is a yardstick with which to beat yourself. And we have enough people who have it set up in their head from past experience, like they're not good enough and not worthy and they're not deserving and nobody loves me, that you don't need to set up more things to fail. But if you understand perfection as a gerund, perfection is perfecting, then if you look at different people who've sustained passion for their crafts over their lifetime, they never stop learning. They never stop growing. They never stop finding other nuances, even though at some point along the past, 20, 30, 40 years, people who say, well, you've mastered this. You know, I have a Spotify tape that's called, 30 at 20. It's 30 fantastic classical music pieces written by men and women by the time they were 20. And we know that mathematical geniuses seem to peak in the early 20s. It's not like you can't master something really young, but the point is, when you find your passion, the dream whose pursuit is self-energizing for an entire life, you need a clone or two of yourself. There's so much you could do. That's the kind of fire I'm talking about. That's your Dharma. That's your path. That's what you want to awake to every single day and can't wait to get to it, to live as fully as you can and vitalize, right? The vitality of a vital person vitalizes. And you kind of infect other people with your enthusiasm, but you're not doing it for them, doing it for you. It just exudes out of you. You can't help it. This is just the vibe that you are. Like, when a flower, it doesn't have a mind to send its scent. It can't help itself. That's just who it is. So when we practice this path, there's two things I recommend before I go into this PowerPoint presentation called the quadrated order. First is celebrate. Take every opportunity you can, any milestone in your life. Like I said, wake up in the morning, you're alive, great. Be thankful for that. Find ways, because remember, you have two things in your brain. You have one is the amygdala, this really ancient part that's always scanning for who can do me in. It's like a nervous little monkey. I can't even take a moment break and eat this banana in peace, because if I let my guard down, I'm dead meat. And it has some survival value. It's proved its evolutionary adaptational advantage to us over millennia. However, it overfunctions, and it keeps us always on guard in a hypervigilant state that basically creates kind of anxiety. The unknown, trying to close the gap between now and later, you can never do it. But yet, we also have discovered through neuroscience, here's something interesting we didn't know, that not only do we have the amygdala, we have other aspects of our brain that scans like a computer. You put in a little program, and now it's working by itself. It's the search engine. It's primed to look for things that agree with what your goal is. Sounds like the power of positive thinking, the thing they used to poo-poo about, like, oh, impress your subconscious mind with a little seed thought from your conscious mind and then leave it to the inner workings to know how to accomplish it. That's not bullshit. That's neuroscience now. So you have to counter the part of you that's overlearned, to always be on guard, keep your guard up, not enjoy yourself, feel guilty if you enjoy yourself, all the things that sabotage your ability to appreciate life. And they say also in the Jewish tradition that everyone's going to be held accountable for all the pleasures you were permitted to enjoy and did not take advantage of. It's like slapping the Creator in the face for the gifts that you're getting. So one thing is celebrate. And certainly, even now, tell as many jokes as you can to your friends. Keep it as light as you can. Keep dancing, singing, music, whatever. You still have kids. You still have friends. Find ways in the midst of the pain. Be like the people in Sarajevo. Right in the middle of the thing, take out the violin, start playing the classical music while they're bombing. Don't let art, culture, beauty, and stuff like that be shut down, because there's a lot of fear and uncongenial conditions out there. That's also leading in another way. So celebrate as much as you can, and don't minimize your doomsday trolling, right? Don't spend too much time looking for negative news. You'll find it. Find alternative sources, and better yet, make the news yourself. Like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. So celebrate, that's one thing. And of course, having a discipline or having an art form is another way of celebrating. If you're passionate about it, every day you have a chance to sit down and polish that lick again, or work on your singing, or throw the pot, or improve the yoga pose. Just the practicing itself is a kind of mastery, because it doesn't have to go anywhere. The fact that you're actually doing it is an embodiment of direct experience. And then hopefully what you learn on the mat, as we say, you take off the mat, because your whole life is really direct experience. Except that when you choose to do your discipline or your art form, your ego is much more behind it, because you prefer to do that. And very often in life, there are many things we like not to do. We feel we have to do them. We'd prefer not to do them. And so we're kind of like not fully in. But you can bring that kind of joy, because it's a direct experience, and you learn what makes the direct experience of my passion so alive. Well, I focus on it. I put attention into it. Yeah, it's not just that you want to do it. You're really, really paying attention. And remember, your attention is a magic wand, solid gold. Focus on something, it brightens up. Withdraw your attention from it, it withers. Remember that when you talk about affirmations. So you celebrate by doing your practice every day. That also gives you a certain kind of steadiness. When they asked the Dalai Lama, what's the most important part of religious teaching? He said routine. Just do it every single day. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. I'm not kidding. We're talking about in for the long haul till you just become a living embodiment. You're no longer thinking about cashing this in. How can I market it? That's the American Dharma. You're not doing it for that. Right? Do this even if you didn't get paid for it. Right? It's your passion. All right. But now the flip side has to also be talked about. None of the religious teachings that you're going to see I'm going to share, the spiritual teachings, the consciousness techniques, could have lasted as long as they have if they didn't confront suffering, or you could say the dark side. And I like to do this in two different ways. First of all mythology tries to get you to say yes to the mystery. That's the first focus of good mythology. As Joseph Campbell said, all mythologies, if they're living, have to show you the mystical, the cosmological, the sociological, and the pedagogical perspectives. The first thing it does is hook you up to the mystery. Mythology, which a lot of people think means it's a lie, urban myth. That's not real. No, that's not what mythology is. It's a reductionistic and bastardized understanding. It's connected to mystery. The first thing that good mythology does is it hooks you up to the mystery, the superessential darkness out of which everything comes from, apparently, and goes back to. And nobody knows what it is. I'm not saying that it's wrong for anybody to have faith in anybody else's revelation and want to follow them. But if you weren't listening to what anybody else was saying, and I'm not saying it's wrong to, you'd realize that nobody else's answer really satisfies my need to know it and have it explained to me in a way that I understand it. Every philosopher, mystic, who I've studied have phenomenal things to say. Men and women throughout history, articulate, able to really say it as good as it can possibly be said, even though they all say at some point it can't be said anymore because it's beyond language, beyond image, beyond depiction. A God defined is a God confined. So it's a mystery. And when you say, I'm buying into the mystery part, which is also, I'm buying into saying yes to life. Do you understand what you're really letting yourself in for? What I call the constant and grave in human happiness, even with all the celebration. You know, like I like to make the kind of existential thing. You go to ask the Zen master, Roshi, what's the meaning of life? Life is like a boat that goes out to sea and sinks. All right, so I guess you can have that kind of like, realism about it. But, if you're not looking for the happy Hollywood happy ending, you have to look at some serious things in life and face a lot of things that seem so unfair and filled with heinous deeds that we do to each other and animals and inanimate objects. It's unbelievable. You're saying yes to that? Or you want to bring a kid into this world? Or how can you live with all that? But if you don't say yes and you're still in the game, you're playing with bad faith. Then you're hedging your bet. Then you got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and you're never really fully embracing your humanity, which includes all of it. Because death and birth go together. It's not life and death. Life is birth and death. So if you want it, you got to accept everything, or you're going to be constantly combating and denying. And I always say, it's easy to say Buddhism said, yeah, look for the 3 heavenly messengers, old age, sickness, and death. Haven't they been all around you trying to show you what's going on? But for me, those are just openers. For me, the worst teaching that I have to deal with is, I wish reality were not the way it is. And certainly in my megalomaniacal past, I had said, listen, if I was God, I wouldn't create a world like this. I would know better. But to say yes to that, that's the first thing. And then they give you the cosmology. It tells you how we got here. It gives you a Genesis story. It gives you a sociology. It tells you where you belong with your tribe or your culture, whatever. And then it gives you the pedagogical story, the individual things you need to learn. But when you're confronting the negative aspect of the teaching, I just have to say this, and this is my role as a mentor that I've grown into, but I sought it first for myself to heal whatever I could. And this is something you can pass on now. There are people who are 1 or 2 generations behind. You don't have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70 and have more years. You've already have losses. You've already suffered. You already know aspects of life that are dark, shadows that you have to live with, burdens you're still carrying. And you want to lift those burdens, not only just from yourself to the extent that a human being can, but you want to help other people. And you want to help especially younger people, because I knew when I came of age, I didn't have a place I felt that society, I could fit into society. I was not getting on that 9 to 5 train and had that look on my face with all those people going to work that they really didn't love because it was soul deadening. And they were just on the wheel. That was not for me. But where was I going to plug my energy? Where was I going to plug my youthful vibration, my fire to want to change the world? I was still coming out of the clarity of realizing the emperor has no clothes. Why are the adults lying to me? There's this pink elephant in the living room. I'm not crazy. Why are they denying it's there? That was nuts making. And so we lost cosmos. We lost the bigger picture, and we still haven't recovered it. Compassion has been in exile for 50 years at least in our culture. So I want people to always go back and look again at the past. Look at the ashes of what's been broken. And remember, the phoenix rises out of the ashes. What can we reclaim? What can we realize that we shouldn't have closed that file? I have more experience to go back and look at that now and maybe find that a pearl has grown from the irritation, the time, and the pressure. Like a diamond under pressure and time. It changes from that dark charcoal. So what is it in that we could reclaim, rename, categorize in a different way, extract some teaching or learning that we don't have to continue to respond now in a kind of survival mode, not a thriving mode, a surviving mode. And usually those modes are less skillful because they're based on choices where we had trauma in our past, shocks in our past. We didn't get the blessing, we got the curse. And so we think less of ourselves. And so we don't believe in some way. And so we just do the same kind of actions that got us through, that helped us survive, kept our nose above the waterline. But the whole time we were carrying it heaviness. Yeah. So really important to remember that and give young people space. By the time a person 10 or 12 years old, they've already seen a lot. They've been exposed to a lot in the world. By the time they're a middle teenager, oh my God, the confusion is so great. And nobody thinks that they should be depressed or unhappy or anxious or please, that's not recognizing what the reality of the human experience is. So you have to both bless them and recognize they have gifts, see their gifts, acknowledge their gifts, admire their gifts, encourage them. You got it. Yeah, fantastic. Go with that, man. I haven't seen anybody play riffs like that or write beautiful poetry, whatever it is. Acknowledge that. And then at the same time, give them space to cough up the poignancy of their predicament. Art doesn't always have to be comedic, even though a lot of comedy is about things that are said, right? It's the poignancy of the human drama. So you can use any form to express the sorrow that you have, and then there's a healing in doing that. And that's really important thing to do for ourselves and for all the people who we're with. So with that being said, I'm going to see if I can share my screen now and go to my quadrated order thing, and you'll tell me in a second. All right, so you want to check in with me, Davis, and tell me that you got it?
I don't have it quite yet. Make sure you click on share screen.
All right, let me exit and go back and see if I can do this again. StreamYard. Share. Okay. Now?
We look good.
Got it? All right,
yes.
Here we go. This is called the quadrated order. So first I want to talk about this from a kind of yoga point of view and give you a little fast forward to what they call the 4 types of yoga, the 4 main branches of yoga, whose names you'll see come up again and again. But really, there's only one yoga, which is all 4 of them, because yoga means union. And this is called Raja Yoga. It's the image of the person who's lost in transcendent meditation. Notice how the beam of light is coming into his heart. In yoga terminology, intelligence is in the heart, not the brain, which shows you how important the feeling function is. As the Buddha says, every moment of consciousness is a moment of feeling. So you'll see he has the sacred scriptures in front of him, and he got his mala beads on. You can see he's doing a lot of rosary in his time, but you can see he's kind of abstracted. He's in another place. He's drawn to the place where consciousness is the empty mirror. Okay? Now, another form of yoga, or coming into union, the word yoga comes from the Sanskrit yuj, Y-U-J, which means to yoke. Like you'd put a harness on an animal And then it can't go where it wants to, but the intelligence of the driver moves it this way or that way. So in the same way, you're kind of harnessing these principles that you have inside yourself that work kind of in a random way initially. But then once you realize you have conscious choice and you start to align yourself with these greater principles of life, studying what the giants in the field have to say gives you inkling, gives you hints. And of course, you always want to learn to practice this yourself, embody yourself, but that there's technical prowess and nuances and explanations that human beings can explain to each other as far as words can take us. It's really helpful to have that clarity. Not only that, but also the relationship with another person who's living it. So they're a role model for you. And therefore you see kind of how it looks like when you're further along the way, or if you want to say you're cooking and they're cooked. Then there's the idea of karma yoga. Here's a little image from the Bhagavad Gita, one of the Indian scriptures, where Krishna is the charioteer for this warrior in a clan war. And they pull up the chariots between the two clans, and the warrior doesn't want to do his dharma. He doesn't want to live his duty as a warrior to defend the faith and protect the righteous from evil and stuff like that. But he doesn't know that Krishna is really the supreme being in disguise. And so he throws down his weapons and just says, I can't do this. There's no glory in killing all these friends and cousins and preceptors of mine. And then Krishna lays out all of yoga philosophy, including why he has to kill these people in a righteous way and consecrate the action to God. Really scary when you think about how many different horrors have been committed in the name of religious warfare. But at the same time, what's really ironic is the first principle of yoga is non-violence. What? And here he is, like God telling you, like, well, you got to do the duty as a warrior to do the right thing. Incredible, but fantastic idea. But anyway, the purport of the whole thing is sacrificial action. Do what your lot in life is, even if it's humble. Don't do another person's lot in life, even if it's great. Do your own, however humble, and offer the results, offer the fruits to me. Consecrate everything, because these are ancient cultures where the idea of sacrifice was of prime importance to how they interacted with their idea of the deity. So in yoga, it translates as skillful action, an action that's done as a offer to your own higher consciousness, which is in the background there. And then you have the devotional aspect of yoga, bhakti yoga, where you find something to rev your affections behind, some aspect of the divine diamond, and you just put the pedal to the metal and you go on out on that. So it could be like Hanuman worshiping Ram, the monkey god, who says, when I don't know who I am, I serve you. When I know who I am, I'm one with you. Or it can be the gopis worshiping Krishna, the milkmaids who every night would leave their families and husbands to go dance in the hills of Vrindavan with Krishna, the all-attractive, who would appear to each one as their idealized version of the Supreme Being. And then you got the Byzantine Jesus, the idea of the Christed soul, the person who recognizes I and the Father are one, who goes so deep within themselves, they transcend their own humanity and experience their own divinity and make their life a living sacrifice of healing and uplifting everyone, even unto death. Unbelievable. So in modern parlance, right, you take all these things and you got to strip them out into things that we can contemporarily relate to. And that's what I'm going to do by going into the contemplative mode, the studious mode, the action-oriented mode, and the devotional mode. And we're going to find them in the Jungian archetypes. The Jungian archetypes. So here's a little backstory. How did I find this? I had a mentor who was what I would call a neo-Jungian. That means he studied Carl Jung's philosophy, who had a lot to say about the second half of life. Unlike Freud, he didn't stay solely with the early experiences in life. And he felt that there was a reason why people live 30, 40, 50, 60 years after passing on the seed. Not that anyone is genetically compelled to have children, but obviously enough people have to do it for the race to continue. But after you pass on your seed, why does nature keep you around for another 50 years or so? The genes have done their job. The DNA has done its job. It's replicated. And he thinks it has to do with what he calls individuation, that how a human being can continue to grow into themselves till the day they die. And through the evolution of consciousness, one of his ideas was that the four functions he discovered or talked about was feeling, thinking, sensation, and intuition. But they were wrapped with so much psychoanalytic jargon, he still couldn't bridge what was happening in the early 1900s to what needed to be restated in late 20th century and then completely given new contemporary wrappings in our century. And so my mentor, Robert Moore, wrote a book called King, Warrior, Lover, Magician, which seemed to have the four male archetypes, but Jung's mistress, Toni Wolff, found in the Egyptian Book of the Dead what he called four royal couples, and that for every male counterpart, there was a female who did the same version as the male, as I'll explain here. So here I'm doing Shiva Shakti as the male and female royal couple, or what we would call the king and the queen in Western terminology. They're the ones that live with an inclusive awareness. They have the good of the community as their default existence. They're put on earth so the celestial benefits will flow to them, to the terrestrial world, and they represent abundance and fertility when they're good. But there's shadow aspects for all of these archetypes. And what's an archetype? An archetype is a portrait of an instinct. It's something that's been developed over millennia after experiences that we have, that then your nervous system records it, puts it away, and as consciousness is able to slowly develop the ability to be aware on the outside instead of things happening only on the inside of the organism, the things that are so deep within us that are not even at the verbal level, but are the base without which nothing else can happen, they begin to communicate to the surface, but they don't do it like in a prose conversation. They do it in images, in pictures, in dreams, in stories, in mythology. And so these are images of instincts that we all have. And it's not like we're going to put an electrode in your brain and say, oh, now I'm functioning in the royal couple or the king or the queen image. No. These are just mindsets of how you think when you're functioning in this particular archetype. So this is the one that represents the contemplative thing, because they have the big picture. The king and queen, they rule the realm. They see the whole thing. And that's the first thing we want to do, expand the consciousness till you get the big picture in. Now, the next contemporary thing is what I call the witch and the wizard, right? I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, so bring Galadriel and Gandalf here, right? So it's, the magus and the crone. You need a wise person. You can't rule the kingdom unless you have advisors who are not lobbyists with vested interests in their pocket. They serve the community because they have vision. And the king and queen can't be everywhere. They need smart people around them who tells them the truth, but they don't have the decision-making power. They're just the intel. They gather the information. They say, here it is, sire. And then even if they say, what do you think? They say, but it's your job to make the decision. And if it's a good vision, because they also control initiation in and out of the sacred world, they keep the old traditions and pass it on. And so if they're bona fide, then they whisper the vision to the ear of the king and queen. And if the king and queen think this is a good vision to support, because they have all the power, they have the exchequer available to them, they put their force behind it and they say, make it be so, Mr. Worf. Okay. Right. So they command it. Right. They reinforce it. But then they don't do it. They pass it on. They delegate. So once they've got the vision, they uphold the vision and they delegate to senior management, and it's the warriors. I just like to put in Arnold. And if anybody see Grace Jones doing her thing in the Conan movie, I just love that. I didn't see a strong female black warrior like that till Black Panther came out again. But look, it was here in the movies long ago with Arnold. Can you believe it? But the warriors are the person who lives for a transpersonal end. They're willing to die for what they really believe in. And of course, we'd rather they live for what they believe in, but they're willing to die for what they believe in. It's really incredible. So they're the action-oriented people. And if they're really serving the transpersonal end, the good king and the good queen, then they have gusto. They bring a lot of energy and power because they're disciplined. They know how to work. They know how to deal with uncomfortable situations and not need R&R all the time. But that discipline really serves them because they get things done. Like an avatar, get her done, son. No excuses, no explanations, just get her done, son. So you need this energy to act in the world, to be effective. And of course, if you don't have enough warrior and of course you have no firepower, You don't have any power. And also, you can't learn how to defend yourself against the evils that are out there, because I'm a hippie. I wish to show that there weren't malfeasance out there. But whether it's genetic or people just have bad early experiences that twist them, bend them out of shape with society's pliers, whatever it is, I know that the core deep down is really warm and beautiful. But if it gets skewed because of some genetic mutation, somebody has to say, you got to get through me to get to grandma. And then, of course, these are my favorites of all the Romeo and Juliet pairs. The lover principle. How do you find devotion to something that so enthralls you? It takes you over completely. I only have eyes for you. And, there's always some kind of tragedy with love. The path to smooth, real love is never smooth, right? Always twists and turns in it. But it doesn't matter. Nothing can keep you away from the beloved. But here, again, it doesn't have to be poetic Shakespeare. It can be whatever you care for, the love you have for your dog, the love you have for your garden, the love you have for your kid, the love you have for your spouse, the love you have for anything. It engenders the same feelings. And through that love, you learn a deeper love, a love for the great beyond. So that's the 4 archetypes, as you can see them in contemporary embodiments. You don't have to do Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. You can step into the kingdom where you rule. You can decide what to do. You can have a part of you that's wise and getting informed about what I need to know to be smart, what I want to reveal as a result of my inner workings, and a part of me that's going to practically learn how to put it into action, make it happen. And I'm going to fill it with joy. I'm going to fill it with heart. I'm going to fill it with emotion, right? I'm not going to be afraid to show my passion or my vulnerability. All right, on we go. According to yoga, 4 stages of life. The brahmacharya stage, when you're a student, and the guru takes moral responsibility for showing you what the way is. And I'll tell you what the way is in a moment. Then they say your second part of life is you get involved in the householder dharma. For most of us, you marry, you have kids. You don't have to, but the idea is you step into your adult role, and now you give back into society in some way. If you studied and you found your thing, hopefully you're going to contribute from it. And not everybody can read that book that says, do what you love and the money will follow. That's the ideal, right? But you work and you provide. And remember, in the Indian tradition, you're providing not only just for yourself or your family, but you get to the 3rd stage of your life where all of a sudden we would say downsizing, vanaprastha, the forest dweller. You kind of give up everything. You pass the mantle of power to the next generation, and then you go off and you start purifying yourself and getting ready for end-of-life issues. You go to all the sacred sites. You get the blessings of the graves of the saints or whatever. We go to the national parks or whatever we think we do when we retire. But retirement, I don't think, is the Western model. Because in their model, you do this, and then the last few years of your life, you're just a renunciate with a begging bowl. You just got the minimal amount of stuff, and you're just waiting for spirit to call your name. Gabriel, here I am, Lord. There's nothing left to do. You've done it all. Now you're just getting straight with your maker. So that's society. We just have a similar idea. We have education, and then we have like work, and then we have some kind of retirement, right? But I say we need to mentor people and stay really involved with helping younger people come along, giving them the blessing and giving them that space to share the stuff that would keep them down. Now, they also have 4 aims in life. This one is accumulation. I just did this because I figured there are people who might like chocolate out there. Accumulation, artha, have enough stuff that you're not a parasite. Now, even though Gandhi said nature will fulfill your need, but not your greed, apparently he was wrong, because it just seems like greed is insatiable. And the only thing I can say is there's a big difference between money is the root of all evil versus the love of money is the root of all evil. Because obviously money is a media, and like anything, you can do a lot of good with it philanthropically, but you can also use it for kind of weird purposes to hold other people down and even institutionalize inequality. But the idea is get enough stuff that you're not sour grapes about having to move on and move beyond this or give it up. But of course, you don't really have to give it up. You only have to give up your attachment to it. The second great aim in life is pleasure. Enjoy yourself. Oh my God, I can feel her nibbling on my ear right now. It's all right to groove with life, but don't limit yourself. Your sensate experience shouldn't be limited to your genitals. Your skin is the nervous system turned inside out. Every one of your senses is something that you can experience an erotic charge with. And I mean that in the most beautiful sense of, eye candy, beautiful smells, beautiful touches, great tasting food, right? And so forth. Every sense is a gift to open up your erotic nature, but that doesn't mean reduce it to your genital nature. And then just open up to pleasure, enjoy yourself, back to celebrating. They say it's an aim of life. So part of our job is to do that. But as you accumulate and as you enjoy, what you learn in school is the Dharma, the way of things, how things are actually happening in life, not just the individual dynamics, but the mechanics behind the scenes. And that's called the Dharma. You tune into, from the yoga point of view, an overarching harmony that exists in the universe that encompasses, right? It includes, incorporates, and goes beyond. It's transcendent of any of the excesses, injustice, unfairness. It shouldn't be this way. Any judgments we have, it's beyond that, but yet it gives you a way to cope with it. Because yoga in its end is not just world renouncing at the appropriate time, it's also world embracing. And so you live in harmony with the Dharma. You find your own Dharma, right? Remember, what's your purpose? And you live your purpose. Then you don't think life is meaningless. And what do you do that for? Is it just to enjoy and accumulate, just to enjoy, just to live in harmony with the Dharma? No. They all roll this into, sorry, what happened to the last one? Moksha. I guess it's Shiva again, liberation. I thought I had a different one for moksha. Moksha is the word for freedom. And again, not freedom from things, freedom from old age, sickness, one, not freedom to, I want to express myself, I want to be free to go here. No, not that. It's the big mirror, right? Look in the eyes again. He's beyond it all. He has his hand up in fear not. He has all these other symbols to show you he's the Lord of the vegetal realm, the celestial realm, the animal realm, the metaphoric realm. He has the Shiva lingam in front of him, the combination of the male and female generative parts. So he's talking about the freedom to experience, you can say your God self, your spiritual self, your depth self, emptiness, the void. Every single word is a choice between mistakes. The idea is to point you in the direction of an experience that takes you beyond any content your mind can come up with. In India, they have a meditative tradition that you just sit and say to yourself, who am I? And anything that your mind comes up with as an answer, you say, neti, neti, not this, not that. And you just keep negating. And when you can't negate anymore and nothing is left, that's what it is. And, you know, as Meister Eckhart says, you don't get to the soul by a process of addition, but by subtraction. You throw away stuff. And so it all leads you to a final renunciation. Because one day, as my Native American shaman mentor says, you're going to have to give it all up, right? And since it's all a journey to spirit, can you do it with good graces? All right, so that's a little flyby view. Here's a few more to remind you how this four order, this quadrated order, comes up in mandalas all over the world. The four suits of the cards, the four suits of the tarot, the four fixed signs of the zodiac in the 10th major arcana of the tarot, right? You see Taurus the bull and Leo the lion, Aquarius the angel, and Scorpio. The four worlds of the Kabbalistic tradition, the four elements, the four directions in the Native American tradition, the four seasons, and of course the via positiva, the via negativa, the via transformativa, use art, and the via creativa, get back, and the via transformativa. And I got to stop here and go back to this. This is one of the things that's really important to recognize in terms of what I call a balanced spirituality. I picked this up from Meister Eckhart, 13th century German master and mystic in the Dominican tradition. Every good spirituality has to have a via positiva, a way of acknowledging the beauty, the wonder, the joy, the awesome qualities, the miraculous qualities of life that just turn you on and make you want to celebrate and savor the beauty of existence. But it has to be realistic. There's also a via negativa. And I'm sure you know some people that no matter what you say, they have something to try to, like, rain on your parade. Oh, my daughter just graduated college. Yeah, my daughter just dropped out. Oh, my daughter just had a baby. Oh, my daughter just had an abortion. Oh, my daughter just got married. Oh, my daughter just got divorced. They're always trying to, rain on your parade. And so you can't get rid of the negativity. It'll come in at the trickster level. Yes, there are angels dancing around the throne 24/7 chanting hallelujah, hallelujah. but there's also a funeral pyre going on 24/7. Somebody's dying, somebody's being cremated, somebody's breathing their last breath, even as we speak, all the time. So you can't deny that perspective. It takes you into silence. It takes you back into questioning the mystery and the unknown. Why is it that way? It takes you into compassion. How can I help out? And remember, everybody has a different way they suffer, a different way of expressing their suffering, a different way of dealing with the suffering. And that's part of their life karma. So you can't take it away, but you can help people through it. And then via creativa, spirituality is not only about enjoying the stuff that you can and also dealing with the tough stuff when it's on your plate or in the background or the nightmare of history. It's also being made in the image and likeness of Creator. God is on a maternity bed for all eternity giving birth. We're supposed to do the same. We can create. And you can say, well, I'm not a professional creator. What am I going to create from? The images in your own life. If I ask you what brings you joy, for a second, if you stop and your eyes go up to one side of your head and you access a memory, and I can't believe there's anything you can't remember that actually was a moment of pleasantness and happiness in you, even if you've forgotten that at some point when you were a baby, you pooped in your diaper and there's something that you remember. That's an image that you have in yourself. And if I ask you, do you know what sorrow is? Oh, sure you do. You've lost a friend, or you had an animal die, or a divorce, or a traumatic situation. Of course you do. Your eyes go up to another part of your head. You remember something there too. Images, things that didn't go well. And that's what someone creates from. The images, the stories, the narrative, the lenses through which you see the via positiva and via negativa. It's the truth. It's the most authentic thing you have in your life. And so you find ways of expressing that. If you want to do it through the normal standard forms, throw a pot, write a paper, write something down, play a musical instrument, do a dance, fine. But you put it in your pasta sauce. You do it in your garden. You do it in the color coordination of your outfit, how you accessorize yourself, the words you choose to express to another person. Many ways of being creative, but find the artist within and give birth to something. And then, of course, the ultimate thing, which all the kings and queens know, there cannot be peace without justice. We have to find a way to continue to combat the negative aspects of patriarchy, which shit on men as well as women, and empower women to step more into the public sphere and encourage them to overcome any kind of bullshit when people say unladylike conduct. Let them be free to express themselves and speak up. We need them in the public sphere more than ever, and they need men's help to help make a better integrated expression of leadership of both genders and non-binary people in roles of power. But it has to be done with changes in institutions. And unfortunately, they change slowly. So when my daughter was talking to me and was asking what she was protesting in the streets of New York, and I was saying, hey, 50 years ago, sweetheart, I did the same thing for Vietnam and the anti-nuclear. But you know what? It still took years before they stopped the war. You got to have patience if you're going to do social work, because the gains are incremental and the changes are slow. But nonetheless, it's something that has to be firing the back of our minds and how we change this. There's no thing to go back to. The old stuff was just as corrupt. We're not going back to that. So we all have to work for via transformativa to make it as good as we can for as many as we can. And then the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, conquest, famine, war, pestilence, they're there. The 4 feng shui animals. You get it? I could keep on multiplying this again and again, but at some point, hopefully, you get the message. Oh, the Fab Four. How could I forget that? I tell you something. I think you'll understand when I see that something. I want to hold your hand. I want to hold your hand. I want to hold your hand. So John, Paul, George, Ringo, they were the iconic figures for me to remind me that the world can be beautiful, even though, of course, like everything else, they didn't last. But I hope you got enough from me doing these models of 4 that we can return back to our original venue. And now it's 1 hour through, so I'll turn to some of these questions and answers here and see what we got. Live Q&A, thank you. Okay, Q&A. All right. In relation to the larger mirror, another mentor of mine mentioned the use of pesticides, poisons the human race has thrust upon the earth, killing our insects, air pollution, and is more direct cause as to why corona has manifested. Thoughts? Well, sure, God, man. Is there pollution at all different levels in the groundwater? And, oh my God. Who do we want to choose? Not just to vilify, but I mean, like, there are so many different places where people have not only dropped the ball, but again, it's a sign of greed, whether it's what Monsanto has done. And even if they make payouts to people with finding out that the products were carcinogenic. But again, the world pirates have taken over. The United States is as much collusion. You know how many things that we ban from being sold in the United States, but we export to other places? And then we buy their fruits and vegetables back from them, so it comes back to us. You see how the karma comes back to bite you in the ass? So again, my basic feeling is this. I said I'm not a social activist or a political commentator, but in terms of Dharma, everybody serves in a different way. And if you or anybody else feels that trying to change the ecological balance at a planetary level, whether you want to become a rainbow warrior and be in a boat that's trying to prevent those fishermen from clubbing the seals or killing the whales, do that if that's what you feel is important. If you want to change it at the legislative level and really change policy of how it's made, do that. If, there's millions of ways to protest, but I can't say that any one way is more important than any other in terms of the Me Too era. Every voice is clamoring for attention right now. And how do you prioritize which is the most important thing? And it's very good cases. Yeah, well, if we all can't breathe and we're going to die because the air is so polluted, isn't that more important than you worrying about whether the NFL is going to be able to play its games this fall? Yeah, I get it. But not everybody prioritizes that way. So if you feel drawn to it, then I would say that's your path to, be a bee in their bonnet or change legislation or speak to the people in the companies to see is there anything they can do greener than what they're doing. And I would take that and run with it. All right. So that's what I'd say about that. Hi, Sharon. Glad you're here. Hi, Rachel. Glad you're here. Okay. So now, Gabriel, tips for honoring the craft, honing the craft of public speaking. In other words, how have you become so well spoken? Well, I came from a family that didn't listen. So I think I've just arranged a life that, like, I'm going to force people to have to listen to me. So I matter. Okay. Well, it's a combination of certainly. I think some people, I have a Gemini rising, so my external persona, astrologically speaking, is a little more loquacious. And I've had things that were encouraged. I think when I was younger, I played in a lot of bands, and so I sang a lot. I was in a number of choirs. I've been in barbershop quartet. So in a certain way, speaking is really using breath that goes through the fear center in the stomach and comes through the throat chakra here. And if you sing, there's a statement in yoga that says, pick a note and perfect it. If you just would have one note, a pure note, whether it's Om or Ah, you just get that vibration perfect like that. Somehow that starts to doing it. Now, of course, in yoga, they say that, using breath control and pranayama, that also does something. And they make some extravagant claims for what's potential for a human being when you tap the vocal cords. Or break through the blockages, because you can say each one of these chakras are blockages, obstacles that prevent a certain kind of potential from coming through. So to me, the raising of the Kundalini is getting rid of the blockage of that energy that's stuck there. And fear of public speaking. People either get ridiculed or they don't know how to pronounce words correctly or whatever it is. But then if you study, and again, a lot of the mentors who I've studied say it really good. I mean, every master who I've studied with, separate from the form they took, they were a master of language. And so when you become a teacher, you have to be like a professional mouth. You have to learn how to say it good. I also spent 25 years in a university, so I had plenty of lecture format. And, like Dylan, I'll know my song well before I start singing. So, and I modeled myself for a lot of people who were great storytellers and could go on at length, and, they really spoke to me because short attention span, short horizon. And I learned to keep my focus, one pointedness, for a long time because they were interesting and had a lot to say. And then did I read books on TED Talks over the years or public speaking, how to win friends and neighbors, or, how to close a sale, all those things that they teach you about sale. It's all about setting goals. Unfortunately, you're trying to close the deal at the end of it. But if you take it away from closing the deal, it's phenomenal things of how to tap human excellence, using marketing for this consciousness techniques. So I studied a lot of that stuff. And practice, and it's a general rule in yoga. Anything you practice, you get good at. So what are you practicing? You're practicing going to temper tantrums. You'll be good at being an anger monger. you practice like letting things slide and flowing with people, you'll be good at being a chill person to be around, So that's how I did that. So thank you for that question. And I'm glad you think I'm well spoken, because my wife, after listening to this video, she said, yeah, just master of awareness, take out the garbage, grounds me right back down there. Anyway, okay, so now Aria, Leah, thank you so much. I've been contemplating some of the things you've spoken about, and you have expanded my understanding of them to a whole new level. Thank you so much. How gratifying to hear that. There were some things I was missing from the literature that I've read, and you've expanded on them. I appreciate you spending the time to pay. Well, I'd like to hear from you that, and I'll give my little marketing spiel at the end of that, because that would be wonderful to carry on the conversation a little further on. All right, wait a second. Here you go. You said another thing. Let's get you online here too. What are some of the things that you personally do to keep yourself present on your path? I know that I often get bogged down in the goings of my life, and other times I feel coerced to speed on to moving on phase of things. Sometimes it's hard to stay present. It's absolutely true. It's a very good way of putting it. The whole path, right out front, has always been, is now, and will be in the future. How do I ground myself in reality, in what is present? Not how do I look forward to something in the future, even though our left brain only understands certain things as a process. Certain things just don't happen in a nanosecond. I wish I could be like Jesus and say, go your way, your faith has made you well, and I see the light. But for most of us, although there are those sometimes momentary and life-changing revelations that communicate to you, for most of us, we'll be questing in search of something that we sense is missing. And as a process, here's an example. You never find paragraphs at the beginning. You have to have sentences to have paragraphs. And you don't have sentences until you have words. And you don't have words until you have letters. And you don't have letters until you teach a child how to recognize, if there's a written language, what you hear orally and auditorily, what is said orally and what you hear auditorily, with the symbol, the scratch on papyrus or paper or on the type it in the computer. And they translate that, and then the sounds become words, the words become sentences, and you learn the grammar and syntax of your language, formally or informally, and then they become paragraphs. So in the same way, you have to build on all these things that they're telling you right out front. It's be present. And yet we all do things that I call postpone. You get involved in things living for the future, always saying not now, not yet, someday I will. And that never happens. Like John Lennon said, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. So what I do personally, first of all, I've grounded myself in things. I began as a hippie, whereas, as we would say, I didn't have shit to show for myself. I didn't have any money to be able to do anything, which is why do you want money? So what, you can travel or buy things or have a bigger space. I didn't that. So I had to learn to cultivate things that only required me and the space I'm in. So I did a lot of songwriting. I did a lot of singing. I did a lot of dancing. I became a master of sacred dance. I did a lot of yoga. I did a lot of cooking, things that in certain levels didn't require a lot of money and were hands-on, because this is before the virtual world. I didn't have computer or a cell phone or iPad to involve me in things that were online. And I love all those technologies, okay? But no, you had to do everything hands-on, visceral. It was fantastic. I kept the things going. I'm still doing those things 50 years, right? What do? I get up, I breathe in the morning before the sun comes up, right? Then I, make a pranayama video for my students, and for the pandemic or whatever, or make breakfast for me and my wife, sit in the garden if it's nice weather, eat al fresco, and remember, drinking a cup of green tea, I stopped the war. Then read some poetry. I've been practicing foreign languages on Duolingo for a couple of years because we've been traveling a lot since I sold my studio, and I want to be proficient. I've always had a good ear, and so I like speaking foreign languages, and and consulting with people, here and now things, meeting with people, social distancing, and still keeping our life together, even if we're not hugging. So all of those things are basically in the here and now, and it doesn't mean that thoughts don't come up that pull me away, but I do enough of those things that it focuses me back into what am I doing now? What position is my body in now? What am I thinking right now? And so that prevents me from getting too bogged down in going further ahead, as you would say, having to move on. And also, I'm older with a little compromised immune system, so I'm very conservative in how fast I'm going to get back into integrating everything. So like, I guess I'm making the most of this. Like my wife and I, we're like a monk and nun right now. We're making the most. We're very fortunate to be experiencing the best of sheltering down. We have money, we have food, our area is safe, everybody's social distancing and wearing masks. So it's not come unto my tent, as it says in the 91st Psalm, 100,000 fall by my side and but not unto my tent. I don't know why, but we're experiencing that, even though I said we've had the death in the family, but I feel very grateful for that. So I can't complain. And just a reminder for anybody else who's still listening here as we get towards the end here. You got a house, you got potable water, flush the toilet, you have a fire on the stove, it comes on instantly, maybe even an air conditioner or a fan. You have a cell phone and a computer. Really? How much can you be complaining about a couple of months of having to severely make some sacrifices for the good of everybody, as well as for the fact that this could kill you or your family? If you want to believe that, you have to wait until it actually happens to you before you realize this is real. So those things kind of keep me centered, and at the same time, living for the future, like remembering the past and planning for the future is still only mind moments in the here and now. So it's not like you can't go back and do personal archaeology and bring back some of the stuff that happened in the past and rename it and reclaim it. And it's not that you can't have a future. I'm planning for things in the fall and in 2021. We have to go on, I think, as if we're going to have a life, even if it could be in a very innovative and new creative way than what we've got used to before. All right, I'm up for it. I'll go with the change. I'll help be a part of the change. I'll pioneer it even though I don't know what I'm doing. I'm making mistakes like everybody else, but I'm learning along the way. And that interest is what keeps you going, right? So, and here you go. Ariel, I like your question. Ariel, I love it. Could you possibly go more into detail about your phrase, strengthening the ego versus the common thought of letting the ego go? Well, your ego is your point of view. How can you let go of your point of view? I mean, everybody sees something from their own particular vantage point. Each one of us is like a national treasure that's had unique experiences that nobody else has been exposed to in terms of your ethnicity and your family background and the cultural model, your educational level, the financial situation your family's in, the atmosphere you grew up in. Was there fighting in the house? Was it congenial? Are you an only child? Are you one of 12 Catholic kids? Did you grow up in an apartment? Was it in a ranch house? Was it in a rural area? Each thing makes you so unique that what you bring to the table is an amalgam of all these things. And unfortunately, in our desire to have what we'd call ego strengthening, we give sovereignty to the ego. The ego, in a certain way, is kind of like a false self. It's a misidentification. It's a composite. It's put together of so many different things, but when you trace it and try to find what it really is, you can't find anything there. And it's always referring to something outside of itself to give itself meaning. It's always trying to impress other people with where it is because it's so insecure. Like a real martial artist who knows his body's a lethal weapon doesn't have to walk down the street cocky with bravado. Only people who are insecure have to do that. So your ego takes on a false persona. One of the worst things that happens to kids when they're not both blessed for the gifts that they're carrying, that they don't even know they're carrying, we got to hold them in escrow for them till they get to the appropriate point and say, hey, you're good at this. And then nobody's taught them how to delve through the ashes. We want them to get through that. We don't want them depressed at all. You don't want to be a human being with a vulnerability and to be exposed to everything that you already have been, and maybe you didn't do such a good job of it, so you don't want to see that reflected in them. No, we got to take them through the ashes and guide them through that and give them a proper place for their sorrow and mourning and loss, right? Which our culture is a necrophiliac culture. We're not a biophiliac culture. So their ego is weak because we've taught them obedience and compliance. That's what gets a kid kidnapped. We have to teach them to be feisty and to stick up for themselves and to say no and to support them in drawing good boundaries for themselves. And when they do that, their ego gets strong because they see, oh, people respect me. They recognize the gifts I have. I have a positive self-esteem. I've built my ego up. And also, I recognize that I'm a vulnerable person also. And there's no shame in that. The wise elders have shown me there's beauty and wisdom there and compassion. And people care. I'm not alone in this. That's fantastic. And that builds your ego up. And then when you grow older and you're secure in your ego, you start to realize ego is not the only thing to live for. Because let's say if you fall in love with someone, it ain't about me anymore. It's all about this other person. I'm hanging on their every word. I can't get enough of them. I want to be with them. I want the rest of my life with them. Like, I want to say the vows. Really? Wow. That ain't about me. That's like an ego death. But you're willing to give it up. Romeo, Juliet, right? My heart is there. So when you get to the egoless thing that you learn in Eastern philosophy, it's very hard for us to understand what that means. Psychoanalytically, the only thing I can liken it to is you've lessened your whole narcissistic grandiosity. I don't think it ever goes away. I think people need space to strut their stuff in a healthy narcissistic way. For instance, when you walk into a room and there's a 2-year-old just toddling around and they're full of life and exuberance, every eye in the room goes to that little kid, as well they should, and beams on that little kid. And that little kid knows, I'm hot, right? I got the stuff, right? Yes, you do. And if they get enough of that, they don't have to keep doing that when they're 12. God forbid somebody never saw the kid or gave them enough. So by the time they're 22 or 32, if they're still doing that, they're either a psychic vampire sucking you dry or they're an asshole. They're a dick. Because there's an appropriate way to let your light shine. And there's another way of doing it where other people are alienated by that very same exposition. So if you build up your ego in the proper way, it's ego strength that leads to ego death, not ego weakness. I hope that helped you there. All right. So I don't see any more questions, and we're 20 minutes over. Davis, do you give me permission to tell one more story for anybody else who might still be out there listening?
That's a thumbs up for me.
Thank you so much. It'll take less than 5 minutes, and then I'll give you my final spiel. As much as I try to lay this out in a left brain way and provide images so that the words and stories can bring other narratives into your head, windows through which you see the world, and purposely doing it using my Aristotelian course in rhetoric, I'm trying to persuade you to get on the path, to flip the light switch on, to recognize the difference between the small mirror and the big mirror, to realize you got allies on cross planes. Don't go it alone. Get a spirit animal, whatever. But sometimes there's a limit. I said all explanations are choices between mistakes. So sometimes imagery can lead you to a realization where like you get it or you could pass it on. I could tell this to a kindergarten class as well as to like any nuclear physicist or person with a high IQ, as if that's the way to show really intelligence, because there's a lot of different kinds of intelligence and you get it. So here's my way of saying it. Once there was a tiger who in giving birth to her cub died. And the tiger cub, being a mammal who has a small window of opportunity to do what's called imprinting and bonding, but since the mother was dead, it went off, impelled by its own DNA. It wasn't even conscious of this, in search for a mother figure to glom onto. And it so happened that it came across a herd of sheep. And the sheep, being social animals and knowing the difference between a baby tiger with no teeth and claws and a full-grown tiger, their natural predator, they took it in and began to raise it as one of its own. And so the tiger cub started growing up learning sheep ways. It gamboled about like a sheep. You know how all baby animals, they do actions that will develop into the mature expressions when they grow up. It gamboled about like a sheep, and it didn't have the hydrochloric acid in its stomach to do this, but it learned to eat grass. And don't ask me how this happens. I'm only the storyteller, but it even learned to go, meh, meh. Well, it was enjoying its new life when one day, I shouldn't say new life, because it didn't have any other life to compare it to. When one day a full-grown tiger on the prowl came across this curious sight and thought to itself, what's that cub doing amongst the sheep? So it charges into the flock, and now the sheep, knowing the difference between the tiger and the cub, scatter for its life. But the cub, innately having no fear of its own, stood there blinking, wonder, where's everybody going? And the big tiger comes up and says, what are you doing here? And the little cub looks up at the tiger and goes, meh. Oh, the tiger was mortified. It grabbed it by the scruff of its neck. It brought it over to the local lake and says, "Look at yourself. You're like me." And now, for the first time in its life, the tiger cub was seeing its own true face as reflected in nature. So it looked at its face in the water, and it looked up at the tiger, and it looked at its face in the water, and it looked up at the tiger. It had to admit, it looked more like the tiger than it did the cub. It looked more like the tiger than it did like the sheep. So I don't know how these things happen, but you know how these things happen. Somewhere from inside came Tiger Roar 101. Woo! It freaked the cub out. Where did that come from? But secretly, it felt good. Then the tiger said, "Come on, come back to the cave with me." There was a recently killed gazelle. He grabbed a chunk of bloody meat and said, "Here, eat." And the little tiger cub said, but I'm a vegetarian." The tiger said, "We'll have none of that now." And it shoved the meat in its maw. And it started to gag. And the commentary in the scripture says, "As all do on true doctrine." But once its proper nourishment started to get into itself, once its biology started to assimilate what it should have been eating from day one, once it started to osmose into its bloodstream so it could feel the power of what was right for it, the nourishment that was really appropriate. I don't know how these things happen, but you know how these things happen. Somewhere from inside came Tiger Roar 102. Ah! That didn't feel freaky at all. It felt really, really right. Now the tiger said, "All right, now let's go into the forest and I'll show you how to hunt for tiger food." So the moral of this story is we are all spiritual giants, but so many of us have been brought up to believe we're material pygmies. And when you leave this meeting tonight, it's quite possible there might be somebody else in your life who's a naysayer, loves to crush your butterfly, rain on your parade, loves it to see you drop the ball at the goal line, piss on yourself, whatever it is, love that. So they might like to get in your craw, "Oh, you went to a lecture on yoga tonight? Yeah. So what'd you do? You got to put your leg around your neck so you could be in a pretzel? Is that what you did?" No, we didn't do that. All right, but wait a second. You had to rock autistically to the sound of your own ohm, right? No, we didn't do that either. Oh, but come on, fess up. You had to spend an interminable amount of time gazing at your belly button, right? Navel gazing. They turned you into a cult navel gazer? No? Really? Well, did your teacher have something to say about this? Oh, yeah, my teacher had plenty to say. Well, what did your teacher say? My teacher said that the purpose of yoga was to discover your tiger face. Namaste. That's it for me tonight. Thank you so much for indulging me for so long. God bless your community. I love what you're doing. Keep going. And now remember, for those of you who might be yoga teachers out there, the 3 things we always taught in yoga teacher training is devotion, humility, and exit through the gift shop. And I don't have anything to sell, but my gift shop is inviting you to continue this conversation with me by either going to my website, gabrielhalpren.com. Thank you so much for that. And you can sign up and subscribe for my daily videos, or let's see how our tech people are doing here. You can go to my YouTube channel, Gabriel Halpern on YouTube, and cherry pick a ton of different free videos, downloads, Dharma talks, poetry, affirmations. And I'd love to continue this conversation with any of you. If you would pong it back to me, as busy as I am, anybody who shares with me, I will get right back to you and continue the conversation. And as long as you want to keep ponging it back to me, I'll put the ball back into your court. Davis, thank you so much for doing the tech behind the scene here. And for my 2 brothers, Mark Brower and Dan Murawski, who turned me on to you guys, God bless you both. And I love what you're doing. If there's any way I can continue to mentor or help any of you or all of you, I am at your service. Thank you very much. And Davis, let's have another meeting so we can have a debrief at another time. All right? Peace, bro.
Heart. This is a breathe heart. That was awesome.
Thank you, man.
See ya.
Take care.